Atlanta.com. I will not be able to be locked into the college football playoff rankings show tonight because I'll be at high school basketball as Discovery is playing Parkview. But I know this guy who's going to join us right now via the Loud Security Systems Newsmaker line. Probably has an alarm set and does not miss a second of it as Josh Pate joins us. Josh, really good to talk to you as always. What do you do during the college football playoff release? Are you watching the entire show? Are you on the show? How is that all working out for you tonight?
Yeah, it wouldn't be smart to put me on the show because that stuff, I don't know what kind of attention deficit I have, but when the certain amounts of numbers and rankings and scenarios get thrown my way, I go into rat trap syndrome, so they don't need me on the show. I do sit there and watch it. We'll move our show up an hour tonight, so we'll be done by the time that show comes on, and then I'll kind of have, written on a piece of paper about half a dozen bullet points of what I'm looking for, what I think will happen, and what actually happens that differs with what I think will happen. That'll be a talking point. Anything that can dovetail off of the rankings is a talking point. What are the utter chaos scenarios like the SEC half-dozen team scenario? That's a talking point. So I just react like everyone else does, basically.
So, Josh, we have a lot of talking points, obviously, on our show. And the first thing I brought up this morning is how do you rank some of these two-loss teams? Alabama, obviously, losing this past weekend. You talk about Notre Dame. You throw in Utah. You throw in Miami, Vanderbilt. How do you disseminate where these teams are as each week progresses?
Well, so if it were me, the answer is totally different than what the committee's doing. With me, man, I just go on not so much gut feel. I would involve data. You have to have parameters and whatnot, or else it's just gut feel, like fly by the seat of your pants type stuff, which is not how a merit-based ranking should work. But with the committee, what I've always found really weird / interesting, I guess, is they pretend to have these parameters, and I think they conditionally exercise them. So when it's convenient, I feel like those are exercised. When it's not convenient, I don't think they are. So perfect example of that would have been a couple of weeks ago. The initial rankings come out. Notre Dame was well ahead of Miami. Now, both of them had the same record. They had a head-to-head, and Miami had the win in the head-to-head. But we were led to believe that Notre Dame was so unequivocally better that the head-to-head result never even got factored into where they're ranked. All right, then I'm listening to an explainer, I think it was Chris Budden on a future broadcast, that said, no, see, I've sat in on the playoff selection mock process, and they do that every year. They invite some of the media to Dallas, and they let them watch how the process works out. And she said, the way this actually works is what they'll do is they'll take a cluster of teams. And if Notre Dame and Miami aren't in the cluster of teams that are being judged against each other, they're period, meaning the head-to-head result would have never come into play. Now, if that sounds stupid, it's because it is. But that begs the follow-up question. All right, well, if Miami keeps creeping up the rankings and they get closer and closer to Notre Dame, is there going to come a time next week, this week, after conference title Saturday, where for the first time Notre Dame and Miami are put in the same cluster? And does that mean that at the very finish line, despite the fact that Notre Dame's been ahead of Miami this whole time, could they be judged against each other for the first time? Therefore, the head-to-head matters for the first time. Therefore, Miami really, really weirdly out of left field jumps Notre Dame at the buzzer. Now, as far as I could tell, that's a possibility. And again, I want to reiterate to the listening audience, if that sounds stupid, it's because it is.
Thank you. You cleared up a lot here, and I like the way you're thinking with this buzzer beater right at the end. Josh Pate joins us right now via the Loud Security Systems Newsmaker line.
Josh, you watch these teams play, and kind of week in and week out, they kind of take care of each other, and as long as we just kind of sit back and let it happen, it should work itself out. But to your point, you watch teams like Miami and Notre Dame win out, and then they have the same exact record, and do they go to that certain thing? Georgia looked great in their win over Texas. How far, and do you think Texas has a chance to stay in this thing at all?
Man, I know the computers or the data percentages would tell you yes. I'm telling you no. I don't really see much of a path for them. I guess the one caveat there, the one hope that you could hold out for Texas is if they were to beat A&M, beat them emphatically. That'd be one of the best wins that anyone has in the country. It would be the last thing you see from them. And if you had like Vanderbilt lose a game ahead of them, if you had Utah lose a game, if Miami lost to Pitt. I mean, we've seen that kind of chaotic weekend before where some stuff beyond the pale of your imagination happens, and all of a sudden you're left scrambling to say, wait a second, could Texas actually be in this? I guess that kind of scenario, I could see it. I don't really see it. I think out of these teams, if there's one that has the opportunity to be a 3-loss team, it would be Oklahoma. And for the record, I'm not sure anyone is going to get in with 3 losses, but it could be Oklahoma. But the other part you talked about there with Georgia, I think Georgia's either going to be like 5th or 4th tonight. And I think Bama will drop down to around 10 is where I've seen them projected mostly, which leads to another really fun question. It may not be fun if you're a Bama fan, but let's assume they go beat Auburn next weekend, and they go to Atlanta, and they face A&M, and let's say Bama wins. Let's say they win the SEC championship. I've always assumed, like most people, the SEC champ is going to be a lot to be one of the top 4 seeds. Therefore, the SEC champ's going to be a lot to have a first-round bye. I was playing around with that calculator that ESPN has on their website this morning, and I projected Alabama to do that out of curiosity. And it didn't have it as a slam dunk that Alabama would jump back up into the top 4 if they win the SEC championship. Now, that is something I'd have to see to believe, because if we're really about to do that, if you're about to send these teams through the toughest top-to-bottom schedule in the country, and then the conference champ is not going to vault up into the top 4 because someone like Texas Tech is in the way, or someone like Oregon as an at-large is in the way, that would be a tough pill to swallow for the SEC.
You were in Athens for that game, I believe, Georgia and Texas. What was your takeaway from watching Georgia kind of thump them late in that game?
So, firstly, I've been there for the Texas game and the Bama game this year. So if you're a Georgia season ticket holder, you got your money's worth for like half a decade just on this year's slate. You also had Ole Miss in there. It's been a crazy year. So last spring, I went to Columbus, Ohio, met with Ohio State staff. And last spring, this is before their title run, they were really, really maniacal in that building about understanding we may have to play 17 games to win a national title. We need to focus on peaking at the right time. Everything about what we do needs to be focused on peaking at the right time. So they go in the regular season. They lost 2 games, but they ended up winning the whole thing. And I think we all remember what they looked like in December and January. So I think a lot of people have focused on that. I think Georgia just looks like one of the teams that's ready to peak at the right time. And it's always been popular to, bag on Mike Bobo and that offensive staff. Well, that's fair, but if you've been doing that, you better be ready to give them a ton of credit this year. Because I think most of us remember how flawed they looked out of the gate. And they've been, beat to death with injuries, but you're trying to get healthy at the right time. You're trying to get hot at the right time. A year ago, they couldn't run the ball. They've resurrected that. As recently as a few weeks ago, they couldn't get after the passer, and they had 3 sacks the other night against Texas. That was an edge Texas was supposed to have in that game. And then afterwards, man, I could listen to that Kirby Smart press conference for days on end. Just put it on loop. It was so beautiful. It's something that everybody wants. It's something that a few programs think they have. Texas thinks they have what Georgia actually has, was my biggest takeaway walking away. And it's got to be a brutal wake-up call, a 3rd time in a calendar year for Texas, who has had 3 shots at Georgia and still hasn't topped 100 combined rushing yards. So there was a shot to kill Georgia earlier in the year. Several teams had a shot. They didn't do it. They didn't cut the head off the snake, and now they're going to be a really tough out.
He's the host of Josh Pate's college football show. You can hear him there on ESPN and a bunch of different places. Josh Pate joins us via the Loud Security Systems Newsmaker line.
Josh, I had the pleasure of taking in Missouri and Vanderbilt a couple weeks back, and you were standing in front of me. I did not have the nerve to say hello, mainly because you looked so busy. You had a phone in your hand that you were watching. You were checking out your buddy's phone, and you were watching the game in front of us. And I just had to kind of laugh in the sense of, like, what is your typical Saturday like when you're trying to take in all these games at once, stay in front of all of them, and then naturally I'm sure you kind of have to go back and then be ready to regurgitate all the information you got. But then also for me, weigh in on Georgia Tech and where you think they are in all this, too, for our listeners.
Yeah, well, I view that job as easy. I mean, because I've done local news. Like, I remember what it's like to be on deadline and to get out there and have to shoot and then cut and then edit and then send back at halftime and then do your wraps and then get back to the studio. So if all I have to do is keep track on a couple of games, that is an easy, fun Saturday to me, relatively speaking. With Georgia Tech, so I've watched a couple of different examples across the country right now of guys whose names have been involved in coaching searches, whether it's legitimate or not. Like Brent's done a good job, so his name's been floated in coaching searches, just like Eli Drinkwitz has, Matt Rule earlier in the cycle. You're watching John Summerall and Alex Golish deal with this. And that is not easy. It's not easy because, as try as you might, you cannot build an impenetrable fortress around your program. Therefore, everyone hears the noise. And I think they've done a pretty good job. Again, we're not talking about a talent roster the likes of Ohio State, where you can just trust that you can go out and choke everyone to death if you want to every week. You're talking about living on the margins. You're talking about a team whose offensive production really disproportionately has run through one player this year. Therefore, I mean, there's high variance in outcome week to week based on how that one player performs, that player being Haynes King, of course. So I do think sometimes something happens that I call the recalibration of expectation, and that is when you come into a season and you expect a team to be 6 or 7 wins, something like that, maybe 8 wins, you judge them by a different standard. But then when that team gets off to a hot start, everyone forgets about the preseason standard and preseason expectations they had for that team, and then they start judging them based on how they view an elite team. And I think there are a lot of people maybe that have been critical of Georgia Tech in late October and into November who, if they remembered nothing more than what their preseason expectation was, should heap praise on Georgia Tech because they found a way to win games, and now their name is in the thick of the playoff race. And maybe like a team like Tennessee, like Georgia Tech's name's in the playoff hunt more than Tennessee is right now. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I don't think it's something that people expected to say, nor did they expect to be talking about Georgia Tech way more than Clemson this late in the year.
All right.
Josh, it's great that you talk about coaching searches. We had a very spirited debate about Lane Kiffin earlier on today. The fact that his family and himself have been in Gainesville and Baton Rouge during their bye week, and there's sort of an open bidding process going on. Do you feel it's a little bit disingenuous and maybe bad for the sport that a coach who's currently in a college football playoff race is now openly looking for other jobs, even though at the press conference he's saying, I love it here at Ole Miss?
There are a couple of different ways that I have to answer that. I answer it as myself personally. I'm sitting back and I have no dog in the hunt, and I'm just kind of entertained by it. But if I were an Ole Miss supporter, if I were an administrator, if I were a player on the team, yeah, I'd hate it. I'd absolutely despise it. The one thing that I think we got to keep in mind is the way you phrased it there. He's out looking for jobs. Well, let's not forget the jobs are looking for him.
He phrased it for his benefit, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, true. Normally we wait until the end of the year before these jobs come open. We're in this new era now where jobs come open in October, so we have like multiple weeks of coaching search happening that overlaps with the regular season. No one's really gotten used to it yet because it's brand new. I hope it's not a trend, but It may be. And I'm just not sure. I mean, obviously you could handle it closer to the vest, and obviously you could not turn it into a circus. But I think the whole equation with him, like the entire package you're getting with Lane Kiffin, involves that stuff. There's a little bit of theatric around it. There is circus around it. A lot of people are turned off by that, which is totally fine. That means he's not for you. There are other places that I don't know that many people are turned on by it. I think there are places that say, look, if we're going to win, then that's worth the trade-off. That's probably the closest you can get to smiling and accepting that with Lane Kiffin. But I still don't know. I know everyone's got a working theory, and every message board has got a working theory on how it's a done deal here, done deal there. I talked to enough people really close to that thing to where I don't think he's decided where he's going yet. I think they're doing a lot of due diligence. They're just doing it really, really, really publicly, which is not the way we're used to this working out.
Josh, Pate joins us here inside the locker room. You're coming to town December 5th, I believe it is, right before the SEC title game kicks off. You're going to be here as part of Live Nation, and you can get tickets to that. It's Pate State live from Atlanta. Pate State material only. No casuals allowed. 404-231-168. We'll give a pair of tickets away right now to call number 3 at Ticketmaster.com is where you can get yours. Talk about what the listener and viewership can be like and what they're in store for when they come see you.
Yeah, we've wanted to do some of these live shows for a while. We're able to do them now. Night before SEC championship, it'll be at the Buckhead Theater there in Buckhead. It's not a version of the normal show we do. It'll be sort of round table, really interactive, a lot of participation with the audience, ton of giveaways, ton of special guests that we'll have in there. So, hey, if you can't stand me, that's fine. You should still show up, because there's bound to be someone there that we bring on stage that you do like. But I did one of those up in Lincoln, Nebraska earlier this year with the Bussin' with the Boys guys, and it was a lot of fun. And I went home and immediately called our folks and said, we got to do that. Let's do it in Atlanta. Let's do it for SEC championship weekend. And we're able to make it happen. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
We were going to ask if we could come, but it sounds like you have guests way bigger than us local radio guys. So we may buy a ticket and come on out there and hang out, because it's always great to talk to you. Appreciate all the insight on college football. And I'll tell you, when you said 6 or 7 wins, the juveniles in here, we all did the 6-7. So be glad we didn't say that on the air.
Okay, we did.
Look, if no one thanks you for anything else today, I'm thanking you for that.
Okay.
We appreciate you coming on, Josh.
Thanks, guys.
We'll talk to him soon. That is Josh Pate from the Josh Pate's College Football
Couldn't just
Show.
let it go. We let it go.
No, I couldn't.
And then we just brought it back.
We're juvenile. Because all of us, the 3 of us, me, you, and Bernie, are all doing the stupid 6-7 thing. Kelly just looked at us like, I don't like you people.
No,
Very
I
much.
just shook my head.